Hello, my name is Neil Brown, and this is a talk I'm going to give at SIGSE 2013 about computing at schools in the UK. The broad synopsis of the talk is pretty much that computer science in UK schools has got itself in quite a bad way, and I mainly want to talk about the progress that we're making in fixing the situation. But to show you how bad the situation is, here's a few statistics relating to 2012 A-levels. So A-levels is a qualification taken at ages 16 to 18 in the UK. So overall for all subjects there's roughly 285,000 entrants, and a bit over half of those are women. As a sort of comparison subject, we'll use maths, which has about 85,000 entrants, so it's a little bit less than 1 in 3 people doing A-levels take maths. Maths is clearly a very popular subject. Gender ratio is a bit off the average. 40% of the entrants are women. Now, if you compare that to computing, it doesn't look so good. So computing has 4,000 entrants, so 20 to 1 ratio in favour of maths over computing. Just 4,000 people in the whole of the UK took computing A-level last year. And inevitably, computing and women, the gender ratio is even worse, but it's actually particularly bad. About 8% of the entrants are women. Just 300 women in the whole of the UK took computing A-level last year, and that's less than 1% of the sort of overall entrants. So this is the sort of situation we're dealing with. The subject has almost died out to some extent in UK schools. So what I'm going to talk about mainly is a group called Computing at School. So they were founded in 2008 to try and promote computing in UK schools. The main sort of part of the membership is school teachers. That's the sort of the core of the CAS membership. But importantly, there are also representatives from all sorts of other groups. So there's academics such as myself, there's IT professionals and all sorts of industry members. There's also people from things like awarding bodies, who are the people that set the exams in the UK, school governors who provide sort of an advisory board for schools, and just interested parents. So it's got all these sort of different members, but it has sort of little or no formal structure. So I believe CAS has something like 2 part-time paid employees or thereabouts, maybe slightly more these days. But certainly the majority of the members are just sort of interested volunteers. There's no sort of overall structure with management sort of dictating what to do. It's a very grassroots sort of peer-based organisation who just try and all pull in roughly the same direction to promote computing in schools. So the unofficial motto of CAS is "There is no them, there's only us," which perhaps a little bit pithy, but the idea is that there is no sort of central CAS organisation who you can sort of put a suggestion in a suggestion box and get them to do something. If you're a CAS member, you are CAS, and if you want something done, then you have to do it. And you'll be supported as best you can by other members. You can maybe try and gather together some like-minded members, but broadly it's sort of an activist organisation. What gets done is done by the members, not by some sort of central organisation or hierarchy. So broadly what they do is divided into 2 categories. So there's lobbying and talking to the government and sort of other useful bodies, and there's activities which are focused on the computing teachers themselves. So I'm going to start by talking about the teacher activities, which are a mixture of online and face-to-face, as we'll see. So one example is our CAS newsletter, which is available online for free. It's very professionally done by Roger Davies, and it's well worth a look. I'm particularly mentioning this on my SIGSE talk because I've got some physical copies to hand out to the talk attendees. So, part of the online sort of interaction that occurs within CAS, a lot of CAS members are actually already on Twitter. Some see Twitter as a sort of silly 140 character nonsense. Really it's sort of all about connecting with people, sharing links. It's quite popular with a lot of CAS members. There also used to be a CAS mailing list on which all the members were subscribed, but that didn't sort of take account of all the needs that CAS had, which is why we built a community site. So I actually work in my other capacity as a developer on the Greenfoot project. We already had a sort of community site for teachers who were using Greenfoot called the Green Room, so we just repurposed that and augmented it a bit to make a Computing at School community site, which now has over 3,000 members, the majority of which are school teachers, but as I mentioned at the start of the talk, there's also all sorts of other members. And in fact, not just from the UK, we get sign-ups from outside the UK as well, which we're happy with. And so actually the 3,000 members have mainly come quite recently. Our growth rate just seems to continue to accelerate. So last month, February, we had over 400 new people join. So over 10% of the members joined within the last month. And that graph just shows the speed at which we're growing. Not sure we can quite keep it up, but who knows. So the community site has a sort of discussion forum and a few obvious bits like that, member directory. There's also a lot of teaching resources, so that teachers can actually sort of share the materials they're using to teach their courses. So this is a particularly interesting example. This is an unofficial teacher's handbook for one particular course, OCR GCSE Computing, one of the sort of about 500 resources we have on the site. But interestingly, OCR have some representatives who are members of the site. They spotted this guide, which is quite popular on the site, and so it's now no longer the unofficial teacher's guide, but it's in fact the official teacher's guide, after they contacted the author and asked him if it would be alright. So this is sort of an example of bringing together the different groups involved to make a sort of positive contribution to try and help the teachers who are actually teaching computing by providing them good resources and sharing good practices. There's also some mechanism on the site to list events that are going on, especially training events for teachers. So there were over 50 events last month in February, dotted all around the UK, as you can see on the map here. A lot of those are associated with CAS hubs. So a hub is a bit like a CSDA chapter if you're from the US. Basically, it's just a sort of group of local teachers. They tend to meet about once a term, so sort of 3 or 4 times a year. CAS support them with a sort of handbook suggesting sort of how to get going, and provide speaker expenses for the people who come and sort of give sort of short training workshops. And we've now reached the point where 80% of CAS members have a hub within 20 miles of them, which is particularly useful because a lot of the events are held just after school at sort of 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock. And so it's important that teachers are actually sort of feasibly able to get to the event after school and then back in the evening to take care of their kids or whatever. It's also quite impressive that that's 80% of CAS, given, as I mentioned, that not all of them are in the UK. So some of them will just be absolutely nowhere near a hub. So we also have a national CAS conference, which we hold each year. There's a few photos from it there. So it takes about 200 people. It's always very popular. It's always sold out and has a waiting list. But it's sort of an example of one of the problems that CAS face of how they can actually scale. So the space at the moment is provided by Birmingham University for free, which is very good of them, but they obviously have a fixed capacity that they can offer. And if the CAS conference wants to outgrow that and sort of take on more people, and there certainly is interest for it, then we need to find another venue, and another venue will start costing money. At the moment the conference used to be free, now it's a sort of fairly nominal charge. Obviously to scale up we'll probably need to start either charging more or accepting sort of sponsorship, which we haven't done in the past. So there are issues as we sort of grow of moving from a sort of volunteer sort of pro bono organisation to try and actually scale up. It's a sort of different world, and sort of money becomes more of an issue. So the main challenge that CAS face at the moment is training. So training up computing teachers. We obviously, the hubs and the events are trying to sort of provide some of that, the conference as well, but we need to be able to scale that up to get a lot more computing teachers into schools. because there's going to be an increased demand for them due to the success. So we've caused ourselves a problem by having success in the other area of the CAS activities, which is the lobbying. So I'll just talk about that now. So here's my sort of little graph of how influence works in education sphere. So we've got the education sort of pipeline at the bottom, sort of teachers in schools, universities, and then industry. So, we perhaps want more computer science in schools. We want the teachers to teach computing. They don't have free rein over what's taught in their schools. That tends to be decided by the head teachers who are head of the school. And while the head teachers may have sympathetic ear to their teachers in the school, they're sort of often concerned with the pressure put on them from above, which is usually to do with school inspections, school ratings, and league tables and so on. And so this pressure effectively comes from the government. So if we want to actually sort of get the head teachers to introduce computing, then we sort of really need government to be sort of incentivizing that among head teachers. But then who does the government listen to? Well, unfortunately, sort of in recent past, not particularly to teachers or universities, but they do have an ear to what industry tells them. And so the sort of advantage of the diverse membership of CAS is that we can actually band those three groups together into CAS and then try and speak with one voice to the government to tell them what we believe is needed, so that then the government can take the right action. And that's effectively what's been happening over just the past sort of year or two. So there's been pressure on the government from various quarters. Ian Livingstone is the life president of Eidos, who are a games company who make games like Tomb Raider. Alex Hope is the head of Double Negative, who did special effects for films, I think, like Harry Potter and other major blockbusters. So two big figures in the entertainment industry. They joined together to write the Livingstone Hope report, which said, "It seems incredible that there is an absence of computer programming in schools." So that was one item. Eric Schmidt, who's CEO of Google, came over to the UK and gave a speech in which he made a slight aside that he said, "I was flabbergasted to learn that today computer science isn't even taught standard in UK schools." That made the national newspapers and sort of was a bit of a turning point in the campaign. The Prime Minister later said that he agreed with Eric Schmidt. The Royal Society is a sort of old, respected body of scientists in the UK. Isaac Newton is among the former presidents. They wrote a report in which they said the current delivery of computing education in many UK schools is highly unsatisfactory. So we've got sort of three different things there, all saying roughly the same thing, that there's something needs doing about the state of computing education in UK schools. And so there have been various developments. So an early development was that we got some new computer science qualifications for age 14 to 16, so this is GCSEs. This is particularly important because at 14 to 16, UK school children are basically studying for GCSEs, which they sort of choose a certain set of. So unless there's a qualification at this age, there's not really much chance to get computer science into schools. So the qualifications were an important step to push computer science at this age group. CS was commended by the Education Minister. He gave a speech in which he said computer science is a rigorous, fascinating and intellectually challenging subject. So it may seem a bit odd that just one item in a speech is of any importance, but the crucial thing was that this was sort of just 2 days or so before the Royal Society report was about to be published. So it was clearly in reaction to what the report was going to say about computing. And so the report had nudged the government into action. But it wasn't just a speech, sort of nice words that happened. Computer science got added to the English Baccalaureate League Table measure. So league tables are a big driver of what schools do in the UK. And so for many years, schools have been sort of chasing good results in the league tables. One way to do this is to try and pick subjects where it's easier for the students to get higher grades. So the government sort of realised this and wanted to do something about it. They proposed this English Baccalaureate meta qualification, which sort of took the results from core subjects, which they felt were important. So English, maths, 2 sciences, 1 humanity and 1 modern foreign language. you take the GCSE results from those, put them together, and this forms a sort of measure of the school's performance, so to try and draw them back to core subjects. And so importantly, computer science has been added as one of the possible sciences. So it's actually in this sort of measure that the government cares about. Now, this is somewhat symbolic because not many schools will necessarily forgo chemistry and send all their students to do computer science instead. But it is symbolic, and it does send a message that, this is a subject to be respected. And so then the government went even further, and in their draft national curriculum, which is currently sort of undergoing a public review, they proposed that computer science, along with IT and digital literacy, should be compulsory from ages 5 to 14. So essentially up to the start of GCSE, and then thereafter students will pretty much either be taking their GCSE or not. And so this is sort of quite a big development, and it's quite surprising in a way, the age group there, the age bracket that computer science is for, and it's not a typo. The curriculum at the moment says that pupils from age 5 to 8 should be taught to write and test simple programs and be able to use logical reasoning to predict the behaviour of simple programs. So this will probably be in a tool such as Scratch or some form of Logo or something fairly basic, maybe even CS Unplugged. But it's certainly sort of ambitious to introduce it from 5 onwards, especially since in UK schools, age 5 to 11 is taught by sort of generalist teachers, where one teacher teaches the whole year group and must cover all subjects. So suddenly these teachers will be required to also know a bit of computing. So a lot of primary school teachers, that's 5 to 11, will need to be trained up, not to mention the teachers 11 to 14, 14 to 16. We're still working on the 16 to 18 A-level situation. So that's the CAS activities that we've covered. The lobbying has been quite successful, but that causes even more demand for the teacher activities. So to just provide a sort of quick summary of some of the points, one of the crucial things in the lobbying component was to educate government about what computer science is. If you are a computer scientist yourself, you may well have told someone that and be asked, oh, do you take computers apart and put them back together then? There's a real misunderstanding among the public, and government is no different in that respect, about what computer science is, and understanding sort of that it's programming, but it's rigorous, it's got principles, it's not just sort of using technology, it's about creating technology. And so a lot of sort of educating needed to happen so that people understood what computer science was before we could then talk about whether it should or should not be in the curriculum. We sort of gained traction and success by having a sort of loose coalition. It wasn't just Computing at School, I should mention. There's all sorts of other bodies who've been pushing in the same direction, but all of us together provided a sort of roughly the same message, and government was willing to listen to that. For the teacher activities, it's tricky. We need to train up a lot of teachers. There's no extra time sort of allowed for the teachers to take time out of school to have the training. There's no particular money available. There's little pots here and there donated by industry or by government, but essentially there's not the large-scale funding that we would ideally need to train up all the teachers. So we need a lot of sort of peer-to-peer sort of training events, or universities to step in and offer training for computing teachers. It's a real challenge to be able to train up the teachers. And in a sense, it's sort of almost been too much success too quickly. We achieved all this with the lobbying, but now we suddenly need to produce all the computing teachers to back this up, but without the sort of resources that we would ideally need to do. So that's a big challenge coming up for CAS. If you're listening and you're able to help, then please do join up and join in. So that's the end of my talk. All of this work that I've described is by the CAS membership, of which I'm only one. So certainly need to acknowledge all the hard-working people who've been doing all sorts of wonderful things. There's more information at the Computing at School website or the community website, and that's the list of my co-authors down the bottom there. Thank you for listening.